I can check on it.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I've got my. Oh, I'm going to watch it from here. I usually have my PA. She'll watch it as well. But she
so
can't
that's
get
the
hold of
YouTube
me.
one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my YouTube because I couldn't find theirs, so I'm doing that just in case. Like just in case it runs out or it's not very good pictures, so I'm just going to do both.
What's your?
Oh, Kellie-Jay Keen.
Oh, that's okay.
That's me.
Okay, I'm going to subscribe.
Oh, thanks.
Well, but then I can test the channel. So if it's live.
It's always a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Lovely. Thank you.
Spanish, French.
I know, honestly. Oh my god.
It's just no.
Yeah.
Oh, don't do that. No. Okay, good. Do not disturb.
Takes one mouse.
I just wanted to start that one, Maren, so
Yeah,
that we
that's
don't have to
fine.
run in front of everyone, because as
Also-
soon as the people are
And it's
here,
also good to stand here and just block
yeah.
because there's people going through this bit.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Okay, you're here.
Okay, so I'm trying to get in.
John,
so
do you know where László's going to sit? Where's László going to sit?
Waiting for an hour already.
Pardon?
Oh, okay.
Waiting for an hour already.
That's new.
They don't want normal people to come in. You see.
Jacob, László's not going to sit there.
Okay, so you turn that camera. So.
Yeah, this is go. Go.
Yeah.
Can you just confirm what you got? One, Sasha, 100.
I've got András, Kelly, and
No,
John.
no, no. The numbers you got.
100,
Yeah,
28,
yeah,
plus 03,
yeah, that's the one.
640.
640, that's good. Okay. I think you might as well hit go on then. The camera, the batteries will be fine. Press record and then we'll do
It's recording.
Okay, good. John, give us a clap, will you? Perfect.
Ashley, look up. Kelly, look up. Very nice. Good.
John, will you say something more?
They might have to pick up more on the surround sound once the speakers are on.
Yeah, I'm getting quite a lot of. Mary,
Yeah.
can you come in? Just why are we getting so much background? There's like
John, can you just speak to the audience, please?
and actually say something.
No.
You're on that one, so I can't do that.
Hang on. Yes. A blue light. Oh yeah. Well, it's. Yeah, yeah. I think it's on. Hang on. Let me just. Do we turn it on and off again? Because I think you might have to turn it on. I'm afraid. Have a look.
I might have said, oh,
Yeah. I think you have to just keep
what's
it.
it doing? Oh, hang on. Have I got it the wrong way? Why are you doing that to me? Like it's charging. Sorry.
No, don't worry. We use the same ones. I know them.
Should be fine. Ah, that's
This
fine.
is it. I'll check if it's.
just fill us up.
Kelly doesn't have a glass.
I do.
You want something?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Still for Kelly.
I've got it. Thanks.
Ashley, still a smoke then.
Still, please. Thank you.
Phone's off, yeah?
Not off, but silent.
On mute or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, Tony.
You've got like 5 people left to come in, right?
It's always 5.
It was 10 last time. I don't like you. We don't even know. I'll leave it behind.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Thank you.
Am I in the way? I want to get a picture. Let me just get a picture. I need an iPhone, that's what I need.
Okay. Good afternoon. My mother, who was a very wise woman, said one of the most important things in life is to be understood. And to avoid a Tower of Babel type situation, I'm delighted to welcome our translators. In French, you'll find them on Channel 3. In Italian, you'll find them on Channel 4, and in Spanish on Channel 8. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the European Parliament. It's wonderful to see so many of you here today. We actually reached capacity a couple of days ago. In other words, we couldn't have any more people, but there was still more and more people who wanted to come. And the reason they wanted to come is that for what promises to be an important and a thought-provoking discussion, the trans ideology threat, European Union women's rights in danger. That's the title of what we're talking about today. My name is John O'Brien, and I'm head of communications at the think tank MCC Brussels. It's my pleasure to moderate today's event, which has been organised by Member of the European Parliament, András László, from the Patriots Group. I'd like to thank him, to begin, for his leadership in hosting and in bringing this crucial conversation into the heart of the European Parliament. Over the past few years, we've seen a growing debate about the direction of EU policy on gender and equality. The European Commission's new 2026 to 2030 LGBTIQ equality strategy calls for sweeping changes, including self-identification laws, recognition of so-called rainbow families, and a major funding of trans activist non-governmental organisations. These policies are being presented as progress, but many across Europe are asking serious questions. What do they mean for women's rights, free speech, and for children? Indeed, what does it mean for the very truth itself? Today, we'll be addressing these questions. Our keynote speaker is someone who has become a leading international voice for women's rights, Kellie-Jay Keen, better known as Posie Parker. Through her Let Women Speak movement, she has inspired thousands of women all across the world to stand up for reality and fairness, often in face of hostility and censorship. We're honoured to have her with us today. We'll also hear from my good colleague, Dr. Ashley Frawley, visiting research fellow at MCC Brussels, who will present her new report, a report that you can get the QR code on your table, and you can download the report. It's called Indoctrinating Children. Her research offers a detailed look at how European institutions have funded and promoted trans ideology through the education system, shaping what children learn, think, and even how they see themselves. An advanced copy of the report is with you now. And finally, we're joined by András, László, MEP, whose determination to defend freedom of thought and protect the rights of women and children has made today's event possible. So thank you all again for being here, for engaging in honest discussion on issues that matter deeply to our societies and our future. An important part of any event that MCC Brussels is involved in is, of course, not just the speakers, but you, the audience. And I'm going to invite you, when we hear from our speakers, to engage in discussion. You can ask a question, you can make a statement. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand to be recognized by me and to make your statement bold, brief, and hopefully brilliant. I'm going to start off by handing the floor to András, László.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for the cooperation with MCC Brussels. This is not our first event. In fact, it's not even our first event on this issue. We're breaking ground with this topic in the European Parliament because this is not something the majority of the left here wants to hear in the European Parliament. The European Commission has just recently published its second five-year LGBTQI+ strategy, which covers the period 2026 and 2030, and contains several elements that violate the sovereignty of member states. Family policy is a national competence in the European Union, yet the elites in Brussels are trying to impose their will on member states. They do this in two ways. On the one hand, the Brussels elite is trying to force a legal interpretation from the courts, citing the principle of free movement, which would require a country to recognize gender reassignment, also known as transitioning, same-sex marriage, and the legal consequences arising from them, despite the national laws of the member states. And if necessary, if they have already been recognized somewhere in any other country. In essence, the rules adopted in the most liberal member state would have to be adopted in all of the others. This is nonsense and deeply violates the sovereignty of member states, even according to the EU treaties. It is also worth mentioning that in Hungary in 2021, we adopted a Child Protection Act. The European Commission is demanding that we modify it or withdraw it, citing single market rules. This is despite the fact that more than 3.5 million Hungarians have supported the elements of this act through the referendum we held in 2022. On the other hand, the European Commission is also pouring a lot of money into NGOs promoting gender ideology. Moreover, in connection with the LGBTQI strategy, the European Commission has also announced that it will increase the money spent on promoting gender ideology in the EU budget for the next 7 years. And it also notes that it has spent record funding on this in the last couple of years. Gender ideology has spread most aggressively in the Anglo-Saxon countries, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, in Canada, Australia. And therefore, the destructive effect of gender ideology is also most visible in these countries for both women and children. That is why I'm very happy that we can cooperate on this, and we have here today with us an English and a Canadian expert on the subject here in the European Parliament. Frawley is a Canadian researcher who is now working as a visiting researcher with MCC, and Kellie-Jay Keen is an English activist who has, or Posie Parker, also known as Posie Parker, who was one of the first to draw attention to the harmful effects of gender ideology on women and children, and has been campaigning against it and for women's rights ever since. The tide is turning, however. In January, Donald Trump took office again in the United States, and one of the first things he did was to push back against woke ideology in the US. It cut funding programs through USAID and several executive orders which were published to kick men out of women's locker rooms, bathrooms, and women's sports. The EU, on the other hand, wants to spread woke ideology and gender ideology even more strongly going forward. Gender ideology is anti-women, it's anti-family, and it's anti-European. We need to restore common sense in Europe too. And for that, let the women speak. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kellie-Jay Keen. I'm from England, and I started a campaign quite some time ago which focused on language. So I was going to apologise, but I'm not going to. I'm going to be very accurate with my language. I'm a woman, a mother, and a wife, and the language I'm going to use may make you feel uncomfortable, which frankly is probably quite good. You may even be offended, because you may have already surrendered some of your language and thoughts to this ideology known as transgenderism. So I'm going to say this afternoon. No woman has a penis. No man has a vagina. I would imagine this is a first, right? There is no such thing as non-binary, and transitioning children is profound abuse. So today I want to take you on a little journey of what it means to be a woman. And we all start as infants, and we're born into this world, and a doctor records our sex. We're not assigned, nobody guesses. A doctor looks at us and assesses our biological sex, and that's how we're recorded. And up until about 3.5 minutes ago, that was quite a simple process. And so I want to ask you, when you're thinking about this particular issue, and some of you may disagree, and I'm just going to say to you, if you're already captured by the cult, this speech isn't for you. It's for all of the rest of you who are maybe silent, who feel afraid to speak in public about this, and I'm going to implore you to speak as frequently as you possibly can, because this is urgent. So the girl starts, and she's a toddler, and she's having a wonderful time, and she starts school. And really, in fact, it might even be kindergarten that it starts to be a little bit dangerous for that girl, or children in general, because the nursery teachers are beginning to introduce children to the concept of gender identity. And really, what is that when you're 3? Well, I mean, it's the same as if you're 50. It's nonsense. It doesn't really exist. It exists in a trans activist head, and maybe some of you might now believe that it does exist, and I'm here to tell you it's nonsense. So when they're 3, it might depend on, and we have some displays in the UK where children are shown something, and it's got a Barbie at one end, and it's got a G.I. Joe, like an Action Man toy at the other end, and then a child is asked to pick themselves on a scale. But that's simply choices about what they want to play with, and I would hope that we're all a little bit past that children are allowed to just be children. So the little girl then at kindergarten, she might be asked repeatedly if she wants short hair or plays football, whether or not she really is a girl. And I'd like to say that that's just maybe that could happen, but unfortunately it's happening all the time. And if it's happening in the UK, I'm pretty sure it's happening in schools right across Europe. It happens in the United States of America, Canada, Australia. And in fact, in Australia, they go one step further, where they talk about the sexualization of children, and they say that when children touch their own bodies, it's a sexual act, like as babies, which is in government literature in the west of Australia. Like it's once you open the door to this ideology, all bets are off on the safeguarding of children. So the teacher, who often is an activist teacher, they've been training, because in most places in the world, teachers are quite young. And in the UK, they're a lot cheaper. The younger they are, the less experienced. And so they've just left a captured university, and they feel that A, they know better than parents about children, and they're quite happy to keep secrets, tell children secrets, lie to children. And again, I'll tell you a brief story about this. I went to a school with a mother who was concerned about her autistic daughter. And the school confirmed that, well, after a lot of wrangling, because they tried to deny it, but they confirmed that if that 7-year-old girl had referred to a boy in her class who referred to himself as a girl, she would be punished as if she was bullying that child. Like it really is everywhere. And the books that the schools introduce sound all nice and lovely, and the word inclusion and kind is often used, and they are not. They're anything but kind, and they will teach children indoctrinate children into the concept of gender identity, and they won't tell parents. And when parents quiz, which is what myself and this mother did, the teachers lied. They lied. They said this is not anything to do with gender identity. And I won't bore you with the story because it was incredibly tedious. But those two teachers who said that had safeguarding leads around their necks, as they told the mother that they would encourage her daughter to lie, and also to keep a secret that that boy really was a girl and not to tell anyone. So the teachers tell her to be kind. Her embarrassment about wanting a female-only space will be treated as bigotry. And what that girl is learning, in fact the boys as well, but if I just stick to girls, just because I used to be one, she learns that her boundaries really don't matter. They're up for grabs, and if she talks about her boundaries at all, she will be told that she is unkind. So she learns that kindness means silence. And she also learns that adults are prepared to lie and make her lie, and lie to her mum and dad. So I'm just asking, what is your silence and kindness worth? Is it worth the safety, privacy and dignity and sanity, quite frankly, of small children? So as puberty begins, which is for any women in this room, it's not the most exciting time for us. It comes with a huge, great big dollop of embarrassment, and little girls turn for kind of quite free and easy to understanding what it means to nearly be a woman. And instead of love and patience, often these girls, especially gender non-conforming girls, will learn that being uncomfortable, that there may well be an opt-out, and she can choose to start taking puberty blockers or pretending to be a boy. So she's offered puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and mastectomies. The war on breasts is absolutely insane. Girls are just, girls used to do it with anorexia. It's not like we've not seen these sort of epidemics before. Anorexia and cutting, these are all things that girls like to spread around their friendship groups, and breast binding is one of them. I suspect we are all quite anti-foot binding, and yet some people just go along with breast binding as if it's an accessory, as opposed to complete irreparable harm. And behind it all, there is a billion-dollar pharmaceutical and surgical industry, which kind of goes against this idea that this is a left-wing ideal. It's totally not. It's so super capitalist, I can't even begin. The government calls it healthcare, and what we did with our NHS is we sterilise children and call it affirmation. We eradicate their sexual function, and we call it liberation for them. We say that this is really where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And our NHS, actually, the reason we started doing this at the Tavistock is there was a case of a girl that was highly traumatised. Her mother had died. She had a very aggressive, violent father. And I've heard the Tavistock talk about this, and the man that started the puberty blockers talks about this as if it's a source of pride for him, that what he did, even though he knew that girl was simply trying to escape the trauma, giving her puberty blockers was actually the answer, which I frankly find completely deplorable. And they take they steal the future of these children, they call it compassion. So is this the kindness? Is your silence worth sacrificing the fertility and sexual function of children that can never be repaired? So then she gets through adolescence, she meets someone she falls in love with, and she becomes pregnant. And then we find the language loss, which is She might be told she's a birthing person, not a mother. She might be told that she's chest feeding, not breastfeeding. And this is just one of the ways that they erase what it means to be woman. And you do it in two ways. One, you make woman mean nothing and everything. So the word woman now, for some people, needs a qualifier. So you need to say, well, they will, I'm not even going to say the word because it just, I think it will make me ill. But they will put a prefix on the word woman, and I refuse. And then when it comes to our body parts, actually in some literature, the only person allowed a vagina is a man who's had one artificially created, and a woman is given the terminology for her vagina is a front hole, which I'm so sorry to say these things in these rooms, but it is something I think you need to hear. Men are entering antenatal classes, and in fact men who have taken crazy levels of hormones to have fake breasts are now welcomed into chest feeding groups, where they are allowed to, in my mind, sexually assault a baby by placing that fake breast into a baby's mouth to have the concoction, the drug-filled concoction, sucked from that man's chest. That woman who's had the baby, she will be ashamed to use the word mother. She will be told that the words woman and mother are offensive, that they're exclusionary. Government documents, NHS forms and charities all erase the word woman. In fact, in your lovely country, Ashley, of Canada, there was a special page for cervical cancer for men who call themselves women. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure they've yet to create a cervix for those men. Again, this is what happens when you're silent. So with adulthood, you might join your workforce. You might be told that you have to use pronouns in your bio. You might not have a female-only space. You might know that if you complain about, as I might refer him, Dave, who is wearing female clothing, if he's using your female-only space, it's likely that you're not allowed to complain to HR because you will put a target on your back. And that's if you don't come across the police. So I've been interviewed 3 times by the British police for the crime of saying that it's wrong to castrate a 16-year-old boy, for calling men, for refusing to use she, her for men who pretend to be women. And I also had the police at my door for being, and I promise to you that this is true, untoward about paedophiles. So I said to the police officer, I think actually you can be quite mean about paedophiles in 2025. He said he wasn't here to argue, just curtail my speech. So we have, I think we've got about 30 arrests a day in the United Kingdom for crimes against sensitive folk. So free speech is replaced by compelled speech. We have government departments pushing inclusion. Even in our parliament, you don't get a female-only space when it comes to a toilet or a bathroom, despite the fact that it is law and we know it's law. And that's because we have something called work networks that are often consulted. They've got far too much power within workplaces. So then we have the betrayal of female patients, and we have a case in the United Kingdom at the moment which is looking at nurses. And those nurses were told that the man who wanted to use their changing facility after a grueling shift in the NHS, that they weren't entitled to a female-only space. And what makes that so much worse is right throughout our NHS, not only are they captured, but there are plenty of men who are autogynephiles coming to work dressed as women and imposing themselves on female patients. It's the same in the police force. Our police force, a serving officer who is a man who calls himself a woman, he is allowed to intimately search a female suspect. Now, as a suspect, you do have a right to opt out, but most women who are in trouble with the law don't know this. So when you're in hospital, your medical record might say you were assigned female at birth if you've decided was chronically ill. She asked for a female chaperone when she was having a gynecological exam, and a man walked in. So she was then in the room with two men. One admitted he was a man, and the other pretended that he was a man. So incredibly vulnerable. And because this woman had built up a relationship with her consultant over a very long time, years, because she was chronically unwell, she didn't feel that she could object. And if he objects, if he says anything, then he is outing somebody at work, and he will be disciplined, may even lose his license to practice. So the NHS policy puts ideology above patient safety. The police force puts ideology over justice. Our justice system has something called the Equality Bench Book, where it was asking female victims of male crime to call the person who had committed the crime against them, refer to them with she, her pronouns. Really, there isn't anywhere that you could think of that should be female-centred that now hasn't been co-opted and taken over by men. And by that I mean support groups for women who have suffered a stillbirth, support groups for women going through menopause, just everywhere. It's such an affront on the work, the decades of work of women in securing our rights, that now these men just pop along, put on a dress, and they have some sort of invisibility cloak, where we no longer see these men as men. We see them as a vulnerable population, which, quite frankly, they are anything but. So then we get into older age for women, and I have met women at my Let Women Speak events, which are free speech events that I do globally. And the lady came along, and she had been to Aquafit. It was her one thing that she did for herself during that entire week. Just that one time she would go, she would hang out with women, they would all get changed, they would go for a drink after, and then a man turned up. And she complained, and she thought she was going to have the backing of all the other women in that room to say, yes, I support you, let's make sure he doesn't come next week. And she found herself in front of the manager on her own, with the manager of that place saying that she, the man, has every right to use that changing room. And so what happens to that woman? Well, she self-excludes. What happened to the girls in sports? Well, they don't go anymore. They don't go to soccer anymore. What happens to the women in the breastfeeding support? Well, they don't go anymore. What happens to the women in rape crisis centres? They choose to just try and help themselves because they know that that sector is completely co-opted. And they fell first. You'd think that they wouldn't. The women that fought for women's rights, you'd think they would stand firm. But they fell first, which tells me that they never actually believed any of it in the first place. And it was all a bit of a vanity project. So that's it really from me. I've lots more to say, but time is something that apparently doesn't identify itself. It actually happens. But I just want to say to all of you that whilst you're sitting happily not confronting this issue head on, girls across Europe are having their breasts sliced off. You can't put them back. Children across Europe are having their fertility stolen, their sexual function stolen. And I don't know what's going to happen to young men when they realise that they can't actually have a functioning sex life. I don't know how angry they will be. I don't know who they will blame. But I can safely say it won't be me. But it might be you. It might be you if you're in a position of power or authority and you haven't used it yet. So I beg of you to use it. I will on this occasion say, let men speak. But as always, let women speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kellie-Jay. It's gruesome listening, but it's important that we hear this. And I don't even think you mentioned the dreadful situation that women face in prison. In prison.
I didn't.
There's a wonderful podcast, Paddy O'Gorman, an Irish podcaster, where he interviews women who find themselves in prisons where they do not feel safe. Terrible situation. We're going to now focus on the European Union aspect of this trans debate, and I'm delighted to welcome my colleague Ashley Frawley.
Thanks so much. So my research on this topic has been available for a while now. You can see my first report called Mission Creeps, which was released a few months ago. And then most recently, as John mentioned at the start, Indoctrinating Children, How Brussels Embeds Gender Identity in the Classroom. So you mentioned that you imagine this is happening everywhere, Kelly, and it is indeed. And I document some of the ways in which NGO funding has sort of followed the money, and what does this actually look like on the ground. So I invite you to have a look at that. But today I want to highlight some of the findings of my ongoing research through looking at some particularly worrying aspects of the LGBTIQ equality strategy, which was the 2026-2030 version, which was recently released. And in particular, I want to highlight a few things that you should be aware of in order to understand what's really going on here and what some of the consequences are. So first, how the strategy uses a series of rhetorical shields. And I think human shields, really, the way, and it's not just how the strategy works, but generally, because it is a product of NGO activism, how this issue kind of functions rhetorically is to use women and gays and lesbians, and often intersex people, as a kind of shield that's, oh, well, you know, we're really talking about sexual orientation. Most people don't have a problem with that. Actually, we're talking about gender, and most people think, oh, is that women? So I'll talk about that. And second, the gradual displacement of sex by gender as an innate identity, and confusion and the problems that this creates. And finally, moves to police dissent, things like the expansion of hate speech legislation under the guise of harmonizing legislation across Europe. Okay, so on the first point, the EU doesn't have competence in a lot of the areas that are nonetheless enormously affected by gender identity ideology. As I explained in my most recent report, it will use funding mechanisms via non-discrimination pathways in order to fund NGOs to develop, for instance, teacher training or curricula that essentially affects education systems in potentially very, very powerful ways, but launders these, so it'll create like a pilot project or turnkey curriculum materials, and then we'll launder these as best practice for teacher training to use across Europe. And there's a lot of these programs have many, many different countries involved, particularly Eastern European countries, and they will embed that gender identity ideology into curriculum materials from the very, very earliest ages through the entire education system. And in countries that have explicitly attempted to stop this, to ban LGBTIQ teaching for minors, they use mechanisms to get around this. Very specifically, the EU has funded NGOs to get around that and nonetheless get this into the education system. So there's very clear murky territory in terms of legality, but there's a very clear attempt to evade what are the express desires of the democratically elected governments of member states in order to get gender identity ideology into classrooms. So that's one way, is this, because the EU is such a sprawling institution, it's actually not that difficult. When people say, oh, well, the EU doesn't have competency in this particular area, that's not going to happen. Well, I'm a sociologist. I recognize that, and been teaching social policy at universities for almost 20 years, and society is extraordinarily complex. Policy is extraordinarily complex. Health policy will naturally involve all sorts of different economic, social, and so on elements. So it's actually not that difficult to get a particular kind of agenda into member states by using these different mechanisms. So obviously, freedom of movement is one. So you can use strategic litigation in order to pick particular cases in order to force changes at the national level. And therefore exert a profound effect, for instance, on family policy. As I mentioned at the start, protection against discrimination and so on. So there are all these different kinds of mechanisms that can be used to essentially evade subsidiarity. And a broader question, which I don't really have time to talk about, is kind of why? Why is this? Why is there such a powerful desire to evade subsidiarity and get into family policy and get into education, get into these areas? and exert an influence, an ideological influence to change the values of citizens. And I think part of it is that there is a very profound belief at the heart of a lot of these movements that essentially the people, if like, Europe would be a great place if it weren't for the people. Like, if we could, like, people are too traditional, they're sort of mired by religion and the past and so on. If we could sort of intervene and change people's values, then they would make better choices, and this would lead to a better, for instance, economy. So if you could disrupt, for instance, gender stereotyping at an early age, then you get more women in the workplace. And that is more or less explicitly stated in some of the educational materials that I looked at. So you can sort of go in and disrupt so-called stereotypical behaviors in early years education, then somehow, some way down the line, you will encourage those women to go into the workplace. And this is supposed to, feed economic growth by getting more and more women into these often poorly paid jobs. And it's quite a complex point that I don't have time to go into, but if you are interested in that, you can look at my report, Families in Fragments, which is one of the first reports that I produced for MCC Brussels. So that's kind of how you have this sort of evasion of subsidiarity, but also one of the ways in which this discourse kind of proceeds is through a rhetorical cover. So women, for instance, are used often as a cover for gender identity ideology. So if you are critical of this idea that gender is this core essence, that a child can choose whether or not they are a boy or a girl or in between or whatever, if you are against what people often call gender woo, this idea that there's like a mystical internal gendered essence, if you take issue with that, which I think most people, like if you look like if you did a survey on the ground, you would find most people don't think there's a sort of mystical internal gendered essence. So a sort of basic thing to believe. That's considered an extremist view. That's recast as an extremist view. And people who question this, who question the effects that we've just heard, are called anti-gender. Anti-gender. Now, when most people hear the word gender, they don't think of 65 different genders, some of which, are in between. They think of women. Because for a very long time, gender acted as a shorthand for policies related to women's rights. If you go back through EU policy over decades, you will see when we talk about gender mainstreaming, it was about men and women. And implicitly, it was about women, because we were worried about equality between men and women because women were unequal. So when people hear gender, they hear women. And so when you say someone is anti-woman, then people go, oh, you're one of these backward misogynists, aren't you? So it's a very clever kind of trick, and it uses women as a rhetorical shield. I'm not doing anything, put away your weapons, or you can take them out, but I've got a woman in front of me kind of thing. So anti-gender is a way of using women as a rhetorical shield. Another one is, if you look at the LGBT IQ equality strategy, they talk about, for instance, conversion practices. And this is a rhetorical way of alluding to the barbaric past of, you might think of America and like anti-gay camps and this sort of thing. And so this sort of, it's all of these ideas of conversion are bundled together. And we have this idea that we should ban conversion practices. And this is using lesbians and gays now as a rhetorical shield, because most people think that people are born this way. Most people, we've had a long period of acceptance for lesbians and gays, and most people are sort of like, conversion practices, isn't that weird thing that Americans do in the Bible Belt or something like that? And then you kind of slip in for gender, for trans people, conversion practices for trans people. And then the document says 47 to 48%, the strategy says 47 to 48% of trans men and women have experienced conversion practices at some point. Wow, you think they've been sent to camps or something, right? Maybe. No, it's anything that might counsel them that perhaps there's another reason why they are feeling bad, which isn't that they may need to have surgeries or go on hormone treatments or or do something that is not possible, which is change their sex. That you will solve all these problems if you can approximate the opposite sex. And if you say, well, that might be something else going on here, this is often seen as conversion practices. Things like parents not being completely and totally affirming this. They're conversion practices. So what happens if you are a professional, or a psychologist or something like that, and you are trying to do your job, which is to try to get to the root of what a person might be experiencing, and you have this ban, which is being pushed forward by these NGOs and these activists, that says you mustn't engage in conversion practices. You simply must affirm. And then you have all these people that are produced as collateral damage of that. People like Kira Bell in the United Kingdom, who talked about how she was actually astonished by how quickly she was pushed through this affirmative process to have irreparable changes done to her body. And she trusted these professionals. She said, well, I'm trans if you say I'm trans, right? These are professionals. And they said, well, you're trans if you say you're trans. And so nobody was taking responsibility for this situation until this poor woman is left with irreparable changes to her body. And this is what there's a growing movement of detransitioners who talk about the fact that this lack of gatekeeping, which is something that that activists have been trying to get rid of. No gatekeeping. You simply are if you're trans if you say you're trans. This had profound and terrible impacts on their bodies, on their lives, that they now have to live with. And people say, oh, it's a small number of detransitioners. It's a small number. It's like, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, you know? That they don't mind the collateral damage of that. And so there's this idea of like conversion practices is again this rhetorical cover, this shield that uses lesbians and gays to hide what might actually be quite reasonable things, that you might want to have a discussion with a young woman about what is causing the hatred of her body. And it's awful when I think about it. Like anyone who's, you know, this story that you told of the woman growing up, you know, I've got daughters and so on, and just the thought that they're going to hate I know they're going to hate their bodies. I know it. And someone's going to offer them an out. It's something you have to live with your whole life, trying to come to terms with this body that you have. And it's like, this becomes something actually that you should change. That it would fix your problems if actually you did change. You know, it's a cliche, but you'd never say that to an anorexic. You know, you would never say that. You would understand that this is part of something that you have to come to terms with, living in your body. But when it comes to trans people, so-called trans people, this is conversion therapy, conversion practices. So you should, when you're looking at these kinds of this rhetoric and so on, it all sounds so kind. It all sounds, you know, just be nice, and it's about anti-discrimination. You're reading it, well, yeah, that sounds good, that sounds okay. I mean, I like women's rights, I don't have a problem with gay people. What's hidden underneath that is what's actually happening, which is that a lot of this stuff is used simply as a rhetorical cover. Okay, so I have limited time and I'm only on my second point. So sex becomes, the second point I want to make is that gradually gender is displacing sex as the primary category. So again, through a rhetorical cover around demedicalization and bodily autonomy, we have what is actually a profound change in what it means to be a man or a woman. So so there's within the equality strategy, it says some countries still have requirements, medical requirements, in order to change in order to transition. And that sound, again, is harking back to, oh, wow, you're going to mutilate people. This is like, you know, medical, you have to sterilize trans people. It sounds awful. Except that what's actually being talked about are surgeries, some of which have a sterilizing effect, that are actually demanded as life-saving, gender-affirming care in another context. But in this context, when you want to change sex legally, this is medicalization. These exact same surgeries that are demanded become an imposition of medicalization. So if you get rid of that requirement, you don't have to change anything. Gender is just an essence, it's a feeling, it's an ephemeral kind of thing. I feel it, therefore I am it, right? And one wonders why, you know, generations of women who suffered so much from inequality and oppression and rape and so on, just felt like identifying as women. Don't you think it would be easier if they just didn't do that? I don't know why they didn't do that. Couldn't they just be like, I kind of feel like a man, so you're not going to rape me, right? No, of course not. Right? So it becomes this, if legal sex is self-identity, then sex becomes an unverifiable feeling. If sex is unverifiable, sex-based protections can't be enforced. If sex can't be enforced, then women's refuges, sports, prisons all collapse into mixed sex. Data on sex becomes completely meaningless. I mentioned I'm a sociologist. One of the most, if not the most important variable is sex. Now, can we trust some of that data? I read a BBC article recently that said there's been an increase in sex crimes by women. Oh, that's interesting. And then and because the numbers are so small, right? If you have an increase, that's going to be a big increase. And it said in the article, why do we have this stereotype about women as being less sexual than men? As being, and I do believe someone at this a few years ago, someone at the BBC knew what was up, because in illustrating the article was a picture clearly of a man with lipstick on. So they were telling us something. There's something wrong with these stats. But how are you supposed to know that? As a sociologist, I don't know. I have no idea how good this data is that I'm supposed to be using. If sex is replaced with gender, then your sex, the boundaries that you have to have as a girl, as a woman, because of your sex, and also because of the stereotypes that are used against you as a result of your sex, which is that you're supposed to be kind, you're supposed to be accommodating, and so on. You're not really supposed to have boundaries. Well, you can't. There's just nothing there. So, for example, 8 nurses raised concerns in Darlington NHS Foundation Trust over the use of changing rooms by a man who considered himself a woman. And it was his desires that were put forward. And as women, they were supposed to say, oh, you think of yourself as a woman today. That's so nice. Good for you. I'm going to go into that little cubicle there and possibly fall into a toilet while I get dressed. Or I'll be real nice and I'll get undressed in front of you. You know what? What am I supposed to say to my daughters when I'm trying to teach them boundaries, that men are going to use your niceness against you and your kindness and your accommodating nature against you, and you stick up for yourself and you say, no, I have a boundary. I will not get naked. I will not do anything. I will not do anything you want me to do unless I want to. No, if it comes to this particular situation, which a man comes into a change room, now I have to say, oh, but your boundaries don't matter in that case. And in fact, if you assert your boundary, you will be disciplined, which is exactly what happened to those nurses. That transgender woman, man, lodged a complaint against them. They were disciplined for refusing to change in front of him. Can you imagine that? So boundaries are meaningless. Okay, I will just collapse the third point very quickly. But I do think it's extremely important. A huge part of this is the policing of dissent. Criminalizing particularly women who speak out, and emboldening, I think, misogynists. The strategy talks about the need to harmonize hate speech legislation, which means that when activists are successful in one country in getting hate speech legislation passed, anything from inciting violence, which most people agree shouldn't exist, to inciting hatred, to insulting language being criminalized, and we're supposed to harmonize this, what activist-led version of hate speech are we going to get? And the issue with that is that we have already seen in Canada, we've seen it in Australia, we've seen it in the United Kingdom, activists will weaponize the police against dissenting women. You've had the police at your door. And will often use very, very expansive forms of hate speech, understandings of hate speech, in order to chill dissent, to drag women through legal processes to punish them for speaking out, for misgendering a man, for saying what they see is real in front of them. That is a disciplinary act. It disciplines women for speaking out. It's like we all have this imperative to be kind, be nice, use nice words. We all know it's not true that this man is a woman, but just be nice, just say it. Well, yeah, just say it on pain of legal process, on pain of losing your job, on pain of having the police at your door. So disagreement is pathologized as hate. Women defending their sex-based rights become suspected extremists. And activists and bureaucracies push for speech policing, social media monitoring via algorithms and AI and so on to detect so-called hate speech, which often is a very expansive definition, and then the outright criminalization of insulting language that people do not like to hear. Meanwhile, self-identifying males gain protected status, and misogyny is often shielded. And just to give you an example of this, Graham Linehan recently, you probably heard the story, he makes a joke about, well, if men invade your spaces, women, just punch them in the bleep. And he makes this joke about this. 5 police officers show up at Heathrow to arrest him when he gets off a plane. But I've been to protests, you've probably been to protests, where there are placards that say, punch a turf. Literally the exact same statement. So he said, punch this person in the in the genital area, and punch a turf. Okay? Police arrest Graham Linehan. Police take pictures with the protesters. Decapitate a turf. Guillotines. That's fine. We're supposed to be tackling hate. That hate is okay. Calling people Nazis who disagree with you, that's fine. Is that not extreme? Is that not extremism? That's totally mad. So we are shielding these people. These become like an extension. These activists become like an extension of the disciplinary state. Whereas women who speak up, and it's very often women, Graham and Linehan being the exception, very often women get sacrificed on the altar of this ideology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and I hope that she's convinced you that her report is definitely worth reading, worth studying, and worth sharing with your family, your friends, and your colleagues, because we really want to get the word out what's happening in the European Union with your taxpayer money. I'd like to open up the conversation now to you, the audience, and it's one of those moments that you don't want to be later tonight going back on the metro and you're going to say to yourself, I should have said something. I should have put up my hand and I should have said something. The bar is pretty low. You just have to be bold, brief, and brilliant. So please, I want to hear what you have to say, what your experiences are. If you have a question for any of our panelists, I welcome that too. So please raise your hand. I'd like to take this woman here, first of all. Yes. So just pull down the microphone and press the little red button.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I want to ask any of the ladies if you want to talk about lesbians and gays. There are a lot of gay people, I never say LGBT, a lot of gay people are worried about the backlash coming on to them because they never invited the tea, and especially in Eastern Europe where gay rights was just emerging. And when I mean gay rights, I don't mean gay marriage, just not being discriminated against, etc., etc. How do you think those who are campaigning against this gender madness, how do you protect gay people from getting part of the backlash?
Wonderful. I'm going to take a couple of questions and let our panelists think about that one. Great. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Is there already research going on AI taking over LGBTQI AI plus and pushing it further?
Okay. Yes.
Yes, hello. Okay. It is a subject that I come across a lot with my friends and family who say, why does it matter? And I always tell them, it matters until it doesn't matter until it matters, right? And for most people, it starts to matter when it comes to sport. You know, because most people are sports fans, and suddenly, all the kind of people who say, oh yeah, let it just pass, let it go, let them have their thing. When it comes to sports, the idea of fairness still prevails. Is there a way that we can utilize people's love for sport to push this trans agenda further and further out of our lives?
Okay. I'm going to start off with you, Posie. Is there a backlash among gays and lesbians? Do you see that?
Yes, there is, and I think one of the reasons the backlash against gays and lesbians will come and will be quite harsh is because many of their professional organisations that were set up to support gays and lesbians actually fell on their knees for the cult of transgenderism. And so I think the only thing that anyone can do to try and stop that is sever all ties between the two groups, because there's nothing, a 14-year-old lesbian teenager has absolutely nothing to do with a 50-year-old man with a fetish. So it's completely nonsensical to secure the rights of gays and lesbians that you would invite predominantly middle-aged heterosexual men. It's crazy. So, but yes, unfortunately, I think the backlash is coming.
And in case you're unaware, there's an author called Ronan McCrae, an Irish guy, and he has written a book recently about this very backlash that you're referring to, saying that he's fearful that the rights that gays and lesbians and bisexuals have won over the years will be eroded as a result of trans extremism. Ashley?
Yeah, I would just add that that's actually a tactic. I think that's why they talk about anti-gender, because it's luring you. You know, don't let your enemies define your politics. So they're luring people to take a stance against everything that is under that gender umbrella for the past several decades. Not the fact that word gender got hijacked between 10, 15 years ago. Well, no, 15, 20 years ago. So that word gender got hijacked, it means something else, and they're saying, oh, gender, wink, wink, actually that means women, doesn't it? You know, pretending that they're talking about the whole trajectory when they know that they're being criticized for that usurpation of the word gender by gender identity ideology. So don't take that bait. Don't let them, don't, start taking a stance against all of this kind of stuff under that umbrella. You know, think, what's the real problem here? So don't let them lure you. And I do think that that's a tactic, that they're actually trying to lure the right into taking stances against women's rights, against gays and lesbians. There might be different issues related to all sorts of things within that, but when it comes to gender identity ideology, it's a very specific thing that we need to be careful about, and that is the displacement of gender, of sex by gender in all of the ways that I described and the consequences of that. So be focused, I think. On AI taking over LGBTIQ and taking it further, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but one of the things that I've researched and will be in an upcoming report is the use of algorithms to detect hate speech, and the way that the EU has just poured so much money into really tackling speech online, and that is extremely worrying. Some of the pilot projects that I looked at were extremely expansive in terms of the speech that they targeted, and very persistent in terms of getting social media companies to take down speech that they didn't like. And they were very brazen in saying, oh, we found 25,000 instances of illegal hate speech. And then if you look at the contents of what that actually means, they complain specifically that some of those instances of less serious speech were taken down quickly. So they know that they targeted all kinds of speech within that, not just what would be illegal, that is incitement to violence. About sport, yeah, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people peaked. A lot of people were like, oh, isn't that just a different, as Faika Al-Nagashi says, oh, isn't that just like another way to be gay? That's what people thought, right? That's what we were led to believe. And then it was like, you saw a man in a boxing ring beating up a woman, and you were like, this is not right. So I think, yeah, definitely mobilization around sport, and just don't play stupid. Just don't play stupid. We all know that this is a man. And people are saying, like, well, sport is naturally unfair. It's already unfair. It's all kinds of different bodies. Well, that doesn't mean I have to sit there and pretend that the man in front of me is just a funny, strange kind of woman. That this is, let's all pretend together. This could just be a very tall, muscular woman. Okay, but it's not. It's not. Go find a very tall, muscular woman then. Go do that.
Just on the again, I'm not familiar with with AI, except obviously there's a really good way to filter and use photos to pretend that a man is even more than a woman than he looks in real life. But on the sport issue, I had an experience where I went to the aquatic centre over in Atlanta, where a man called Will Thomas was swimming against Riley Gaines. and I like to take credit for Riley Gaines in many ways. So they were all in the pool. I was in a room full of parents who were all there watching their daughters and son, but mainly their daughters swim. And Will Thomas was huge in comparison to the female swimmers, who were all very athletic women. And in that moment of silence, I just said the words, well, I shouted them very loudly actually, "He's a man," which totally broke the spell. And actually, Riley Gaines heard that, and that gave her the courage to come and speak out. She says that, I haven't made that up. But when you say people care about sports, I think you mean men. And I think that's the way to convince men, because I don't think men really know how it feels to be in that cubicle in a female-only toilet and hear a man's voice and hold your breath. I don't think men, and I'm sure they're all empathetic and lovely people, but I think sport just happens to be, that's an issue of fairness and justice, and it's just so overt. So I think men are very persuaded, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it's going to take a lot of them to turn this particular ship around.
András.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the AI part. So the way AI is developed is that they use a large database of information which the software processes, and then it makes it. That's what they use to teach AI, for AI learning. And unfortunately, it really matters what kind of language models they're trained on, what these AI models are trained on. That's why it's particularly important how we train them, because if you feed them mainstream media kind of content, then the AI will give you that kind of response. AI is not actually an artificial intelligence in the sense that it will produce. It will just summarize and further develop thoughts and opinion, which is written down by humans. So it will be just as biased as the language model which it is trained on. And I think women's groups need to be very aware of this and where this is going, because LGBTQI, gender ideology, will be further promoted by AI if it's trained on such material. I did a research paper last year with two colleagues of mine before the European elections last year. We looked at all the previous reports, human rights reports and fundamental rights reports of the European Parliament going back 20, 30 years. I personally, from the team, I looked at the latest legislative cycle of 2019 and 2024 on how is language used? What is the context and the frequency of using words like gender, women, family, minority, gypsy, religious, and the list of words. And it turned out that actually the European Parliament is a major vehicle for pushing for spreading gender ideology. And what started in context, the usage of the word gender as referencing men and women, it became extremely enlarged. And you're not actually changing something, you're just reinterpreting previous language, yes, which didn't mean what it means today. Yeah. And that's why it's very interesting what's going to happen with AI and how we interpret this. And that's why we need to be acutely aware of how this works, how this technology works, and how the bias of the past is going to be present in the bias of AI.
I'm so sorry, can I add to that?
Okay.
I forgot to mention as well that things like pieces of legislation like the AI Act, I'm fairly sure NGOs have been successful, that is that they were behind sort of inserting some limited prohibitions on the ability of AI technologies to identify at least sexual orientation and sex in some limited applications like employment. But there have also been pushes for total bans on the ability to identify sexual orientation and gender in any way online using these technologies. And to a certain extent, that's good. I mean, we want privacy, but these NGOs are pushing for like absolute surveillance of our speech online, but at the same time want to prevent AI technologies from identifying their sex. And if you think about like, you know, the case of the lesbian dating app in which they tried to use software in order to ensure that only women could go on this app, you know, this was shut down, you know, and this is a potential application or lack of application of that in the future that we need to think about. Like if we're going to defend our privacy, we defend our privacy for everybody, not just protecting some groups. It can't be like algorithms and AI for thee, but not for me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll take this gentleman here.
Hello, I have 3 short questions. Why this transgender agenda is happening now and not 10 years ago? Which countries, social groups, corporations get benefits of this agenda? Don't you think that the real trans agenda goal is not only about destruction, but distraction of talking concerning more important topics society needs to talk, topics that they need to be handled? And finally, what can we do as citizens to fight back this brainwashing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This lady here.
Hi. I would like to go back to what Kelly said about basically women not having a front, and when things like this happen with the transgender, that the other women, they were like, oh no, that actually connects with what you said, that we always have a feeling that we need to be liked, that we need to be positive. But how do we change that? Because if we look at the educational system right now, we see that they're still being taught to have almost no boundaries. But also for myself, I feel like it's very difficult getting this front, even with like-minded women. But when it comes to it, they will always go back. We will never really form a front. And I would love to have some insights what you do on a daily basis to create this front. Thank you.
Very, very nice question. Here, yes? Yep.
Thank you very much. It's a question really for András, László. But first, just to say, as a former teacher reading Ashley's report on the bus here, it is horrifying what you've uncovered, because the reality is the harm starts very young. The confusion that Kelly spoke about causing young people's head. I watched it just spread like wildfire in a further education college a few years ago. It's starting younger and younger, as Ashley's report makes clear, including in Hungary, András, László, including in Hungary, where they actually are providing training, as identified by Ashley's report, for teachers outside of the school to circumvent the government's approach and to get this literature in there. And so my question to you, Mr. László, is you mentioned the case against Hungary. It's actually not just about the common market. It's an Article 2 case, which means it's a case of European values that's now before the European Court of Justice. European values. And it seems to me that this is a fantastic and important opportunity to actually talk on a big scale about European values. Is it the European values that allow this irreparable harm to be promoted in this underhand way that Ashley's drawn attention to? Is that the European values that we should stand up for? Or is there an opportunity here to stand up for some different values in the way in which Slovakia have recently done by amending their constitution?
Thank you. András, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Yeah, so through the NGOs, the US had been financing such, through USAID, the US government had been financing a lot of these LGBT NGOs and woke ideology from different aspects. So have the Brits through their development agency, the Scandinavians, the Dutch, the Belgians, etc. This is super common. If you look at how active European governments are, and it's absolutely insane. If you look at development aid through Africa to Asia, it very often includes conditions that they should change this or that kind of law to facilitate LGBTIQ rights and ideology through different countries if they want Western support for development. So this is very much present. It's present in training not only of the teachers, it's training of judges and legal experts, training of HR staff, training of everywhere, basically. The training is like, because it's not binding. when you just train. You're just raising awareness. You're just sensitizing people in different professional fields. That's what's going on. In Hungary, with the child protection law, this is exactly what we did. We banned ideology and these kind of activists and trainers, etc., to come into schools, to come into kindergartens, to be present in child television shows, in storybooks for children, etc., because we want to have the option for the parents to have an active consent that their children reach, or such content reaches their children. So what we did was, in our law, it was actually not, it was always portrayed in media as, oh, this is an anti-gay law or anti-LGBT law. It wasn't. It was meant to remove any kind of sexual content from reaching the children without the consent of the parents. So we were defending parents' right to decide when and how their children will be introduced to sexuality and sexual content and all these always not very easy things. This is what they're attacking it. And the court case which you mentioned is still ongoing. There could be a ruling very soon, by the end of the year or early next year, in the European Court of Justice about this. And it's very, very dangerous that they're talking about this from an Article 2 perspective, because Article 2 is like the fundamental rights of whatever, but it's the least precise article of such. There are, in fact, specific articles on education, on children's rights in international documents, including at the UN, including for the European Union, etc. Yet they take the most general one to be able to interpret it whichever way they want. But if you make this into an issue against member states based on Article 2, basically what you're saying is anything goes. Anything is allowed against member states, because you're not looking, and it's also, I'm not trained in law and legal affairs, but I did receive some training, and specific law always comes first to a more general law, and the Constitution always comes first to an interpretation of a law, etc. That's why in Hungary we're putting as much of these barriers towards these ideologies into the Constitution to prevent easy legislative change, and also to prevent courts from overriding through an interpretation of what the government is supposed to do and what the state is supposed to do. Just one last comment on the gentleman. You didn't address it to me, but I wanted. What I noticed when we did this research paper on where this all originated from, we dated it back to 2009. What happened in 2009? It was the taking office of the Obama administration, one thing, and then it gradually developed afterwards. And the second thing was, which we found, was a document of that time of the French EU presidency, 2009, who published a presidency paper on the subject. It wasn't even adopted as a non-legislative paper through the council, through all the member states. It was just the French presidency who put this forward, and then it started a snowball.
Okay. Kellie-Jay.
The question of who, what, where, how, I think it's also, in addition to Obama, who I think was catastrophic for women's rights, it's also the internet. Pornography is a main source of blame, particularly with their algorithms. Some of the chief execs in Pornhub admitted actually trying to change people's sort of sexuality and what they wanted to look at online, so they would give different things in the algorithm. So even if somebody was looking at heterosexual pornography, I mean, if you could call it that, they would look at that. They would introduce gay porn and also porn involving so-called transsexuals. So I think that's very much at play. Pharmaceutical industry, they make an absolute fortune and, pardon the pun, killing out of this entire industry. And there have been kickbacks. So Lupron, for example, which is the puberty blocker, when Lupron was used for men with prostate cancer, they knew that actually it wasn't really effective. It wasn't going to give them a longer life, and actually it might cause heart attacks and shorten their lives. But some individual doctors across the United States of America were getting kickbacks to the tune of like 1.6 million. So you can never really discount power and money and what an incredible force that will be for corruption. And this, I think, in particular, is very corrupt. And I think there are many different reasons why people get involved in it. Money, power is one, but also some people want to see the annihilation of the family. There are definitely some old legacy organised paedophiles that would like to see us completely obliterate safeguarding. You remove women's rights, you remove mothers' rights, and you have access to children. So if you just think of the most catastrophic, demonic set of individuals that might get together to do it, then you're pretty much there. Do you want to add?
This question that the lady asked about sort of being a good girl in school and the problems with that.
Well, I think we just have to encourage the truth. And I think that women, I have a feeling it is a biological component to being female, actually. And I think it's all to do with how we form societies and why we are the cohesive element in society, and men are cohesive element in amongst themselves, but also an integral part of the family, obviously. And I think it is that. So I think it's difficult women that often speak up. And I can tell you there is no end of joy by leading an organisation where we have lots of difficult women, and how hilarious, I think we could say, it is to watch difficult women work together in harmony. And I do often have to take a mother role and say, just remember, we're all volunteers. So women do have an issue in working together, and I think that is the niceness and the kindness is not niceness or kindness. It's seen to be nice and kind, which I think makes it a totally different animal to actually being kind. Because being kind would say, well, obviously that's a female-only space, only women can go in it. That would be the genuine kind thing to do, looking at who is more vulnerable, who needs the assistance and support. That would be the kind thing to do. But there is nothing kind about saying, well, I will let that 6-foot bloke in that space with those women, because that's a kind and inclusive thing to do. How you encourage it, I think, is teaching children to have integrity. Like, whether they're male or female, you teach integrity. I tell my children all the time, this is not your hill to die on. I'll do that for all of us. This is not their hill to die on, but they don't have to lie. They don't always have to fight it, but they don't have to lie.
Briefly, oh God. Okay, why is the trans stuff happening now? Okay, perhaps I will not attempt to explain this, but I wrote about this for Compact Magazine. I invite you to go and have a look at my piece called How Society Got a Sex Change. I'm senior editor there, I'm a columnist there, you can read a lot of my work and I explore that, so then you can homework. Okay, so how do we change that women are not taught boundaries and be nice and so on? Yeah, as you said, it's a faux kind of kindness, it's not real, but I think also what has happened at the moment, what I describe in that article, is that the ideal subject of our so-called democracies has changed. It used to be the so-called masculine ideal. But that was quite disruptive. Like, movements of working men were quite disruptive. Men believed in their rationality. They stubbornly believe that they should have a say. They demand more money in the workplace. Can't have that. We want women. Women are nice and kind and deferential, and they follow rules and they defer to authority. This is not how women are not born this way, I think, being like, ooh, tell me, I don't know what I see in front of me. Is it a man or a woman? No, tell me, give me the rule book. No, women are socialized in that way. And that socialization has held us back for a very, very long time. And all these so-called masculine things that people like Judith Butler want us to toss out were actually the ideals of the public sphere that women were being kept from, like reason, rationality, being closer to godliness. But women were closer to nature, so we can't have that. And instead of being like, hey, that was crap, actually we all are humans, we all belong in the public sphere. It's like, hey, ladies, all that stuff about being close to nature, that was great. You should embrace that. Where there are women, there is peace, because you're passive and so on. All those insulting things that they said about women, now we are invited to embrace them as feminism. That's completely backward, and we should contest that. We should want a seat at the table because we are humans, not because we are going to be nice and kind and bring about world peace in some weird way because of our hormones. I don't know. No, because we are reasonable, logical, and we make demands too, and we shouldn't be afraid to do so.
Okay, let's hear from you. I want to take the woman up at the back. Yes.
I would like to address a completely different topic. It's about the sterilizing and mutilation of children. How is it possible that across Europe, in the European Union, doctors are allowed to do this, to cut off healthy body parts of healthy children? It's still going on in many countries, and isn't there any other legislation that could prevent this?
Thank you. Yes, here. No, sorry, behind you. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask what Kellie-Jay said before. So she already mentioned in the last answer, but we in the conservative sphere, we are really obsessed with not touching this issue as a capitalist idea. We are talking about all the time about Marxist, cultural Marxism, about wokeism, about socialists, communists. But this is, I mean, this is a logical development of self-independence, like liberalism at the post-national level. Can you develop this idea more or less what you have in mind? Thank you.
Okay. The gentleman in the green sweater. Yes. Please put on your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah. So you said that, that was Kelly, that certain ideologists think that children are capable of sexual acts. So do you think that this may be a slippery slope to legalizing paedophilia? And perhaps the paedophile may end up as a new letter on the LGBTQ heteronym.
Okay, thank you. Herman.
I'd be glad to know, as you were warming up here, there was actually a web stream for MEPs and staff started at 12 o'clock today about gender action plan. Of course, they spent a long section of that time talking about the need for censorship and get onto the phone to the President of Parliament when he heard something he didn't like about the gender trans issue and get on into that. But I'd like to agree very much with what Kellie-Jay has said there about standing up, like let's say the entry point into cultural conversation, especially with men, is to talk about fairness in sport. I'd like to add on about some of the things that just mentioned here recently about another big entry point, I believe, is about the indoctrination of children and parental rights and education, which is very important. And a lot of parents want to have a say in what their children are taught. Another aspect, I believe, is about people don't like not just fairness, but also the protective thing. No one likes the idea that men are in prison or in women's spaces beating women to a pulp. So the whole thing about it's not nice and kind to have men in these spaces where women are unprotected from big strong men. But in regards to the Parliament and the European Commission, you're probably aware that the European Commission LGBTIQ minus 2026 2030 plan has in it, in black and white, that they want to introduce the harmonisation of gender recognition for young children with no age limit. Now, I think that the vast majority of people across the world will find that absolutely appalling when you're talking about the legalisation to allow, as that woman talked about, the mutilation and sterilisation of young children. Do you know what? The whole issue of the imposition of trans ideology, we can see over the last number of years that the more people learn about it, the more they're opposed to it. And the more where it's kind of rode this wave of, oh yeah, it's something to do with gender and LGBT. No, once we point out that this dangerous trans ideology, what it means for ourselves, our children, is extremely dangerous. And you know what? I think when you look at polls over the last number of years, that the whole trans thing is going down in popularity, and all we have to do, as Kellie-Jay has bravely over many years spoken up about, is speak the truth. And I would say one thing is to trash this idea of to rely on biology and talk about sex, and to absolutely trash the touchy-feely, how do you feel, gender language of genders. There's as many genders as there are people, and I feel like, and I describe myself as whatever, grass-care, but there's two sexes.
Okay, thank you very much. Kellie-Jay, is there anything you want to pick up on that people said?
To do with the sterilisation of children and mutilation of children and what doctors are willing to do. I mean, we have doctors across Europe killing teenagers in the name of euthanasia. I mean, I don't even know how to articulate the evil that is. So for me, I think that once you say that children can consent to being sterilised, I think they can consent to having sex with adults. So the point of the chap in the green jumper, I do think it's a slippery slope. I think we would be foolish if people, I often say to people, we had a prolific paedophile called Jimmy Savile, and he spent his life doing things so he could get to children. It would be so stupid to think that if I don't want to say I, that if a paedophile or a group of paedophiles, to think that they wouldn't use any mechanism at all to get to children, and this wouldn't be a perfect one, would be ridiculous. Whether it will go as far as to be added to that particular kind of nearly all the letters in the alphabet, I don't know. I hope not. But we know that, you know, NAMBLA, which is the National Association of Man and Boy Love in America, has never really gone away. So I would say that. And I agree with everything that Herman was saying. I think...
What about the point that Javier made about this idea about, you know, making capitalism as being one of the drivers, and that makes some conservatives feel uncomfortable? What do you think about that?
Well, look, any mechanism is going to be used for people to get what they want. Clearly, capitalism. If you can sell healthcare, if you can sell sterilising a child and calling it healthcare. I mean, I've always wondered how in America they managed to do it with the insurance companies getting on board and paying for it. But apparently, it's cheaper than litigation. So. You know, in that respect, it was also capitalist. But in the United Kingdom, we are building, our NHS is building a phalloplasty part of the Chelsea and Westminster. It's costing millions. And if you don't know what phalloplasty is, it's taking all of the flesh from a female's arm, fashioning it into something that kind of looks like a penis. I don't have one myself, but I'm assured that it won't work like one, or be as sensitive as one, or do anything like one. In fact, it will vaguely look like one from a long way off, a couple of kilometres maybe. But we will be putting, and also they have corrective surgery. So I'm going to be really grotesque, but do bear with, because I think it's worth saying. One of the corrective surgeries as a side effect from having a phalloplasty was that the young woman was urinating from her anus. That was 32 corrective surgeries she had to have. And do you know what compelled her to do it? She wanted to wee standing up. She wanted to go to the toilet standing up. She felt that that was going to be her life ambition. Everything was going to be resolved if she could be shirtless on a beach and stand up. And I kind of think, well, in the south of France, you used to be able to be shirtless on a beach with breasts. I think that might have changed in the latter years, but yeah, we can't be shy of anything. Like every mechanism, it is also Marxist thinking. It is also the destruction of the family and destruction of truth and reality, so chaos is caused. But also capitalism makes a mighty profit from it, so of course it's also utilised.
Thank you.
In terms of, is this a slippery slope to pedophilia? I'm not sure. I think there's an enormous taboo on that, thankfully. In society, it would be very, very difficult to remove. I think the bigger issue is this, what this sexualization of children seems to speak to, which is a gradual giving of adult subjectivity to children at the same time as treating adults more like children. So children become more like adults, and adults become more like children. So if you look, a lot of the consultations, they will around family policy or anything to do with the family, institutions will go straight to the children, not the parents. They have to bypass the parents. The parents are suspect. Whereas the children are seen as, adults, they never change their mind, it's too late. But children are the future. That's where we're going to put all of our energy. And so you see movements to lower the voting age and to talk about sexuality and so on, because it's like creating new citizens and subjects out of children, which is very strange and self-defeating, because obviously the children will grow up eventually and you can't. But I think it springs from a more and more desperate attempt at social control. Adults keep behaving badly, and their bad behaviors lead to all these social problems, and we can't seem to solve those social problems, so we have to go to the children. And it's not just this issue, it's all kinds of issues. But in terms of, someone had mentioned gender recognition with no age limit. I think part of what people don't seem to understand, and I think is a core divide between the pro-trans lobby and everyone who, I'm not sure even actually, it's maybe implicit in the people who question it, it's that they have a tendency to see identity as fixed. Unless, of course, you're a girl who likes girly things. That can be changed. As I talk about in my most recent report, they will say, gender identity is learned and can therefore be unlearned. And what they mean by that is girls who like girly things and boys who like boyish things. But if you're a boy who likes girly things, then that's your innate gender identity, which is fixed. So they have this very fixed idea of identity. But if you have an idea of identity and subjectivity and psychology as being very malleable, which I think is true, our psychology is extraordinarily elastic. We become fundamentally different people depending on the context in which we were raised. We're very, very elastic as human beings. Then it's terrifying to see these people go into the classroom with a storybook about Sam the snail, who doesn't know if he wants to be a Sam or a Samantha. I don't know if I want to be a boy or a girl, because you are creating something that was not there before, with the long-term consequences of medicalization and so on. And also just destroying the stable identity that's beginning to develop in childhood. It's displacing that. So that's what I think is really important to kind of get across. I think it seems so obvious to me, but to just point out that you are not discovering an identity inside of people. You are making something new, and something that it can be extraordinarily destructive and very profitable in terms of setting people down medicalized pathways.
Okay. We're out of time. I want to thank you all for coming along today. I think these things are unpleasant, uncomfortable, distressing to talk about, but I think it's really important that we do talk about them, and we talk about them with our friends, our colleagues. We talk about them with our politicians, and we tell our politicians what we expect and what we don't want and what we think is a clear and present danger, especially for girls and women. Thank you for coming along today. I hope you take the opportunity to read Ashley's report. I hope you can get the report. It's on the QR code on front of you, on the takeout. You can get it there. It's also on the MCC Brussels website, if you prefer to discover it there. Please do have a look at that report. Ashley has another 2 reports coming out soon on different aspects of the transgender lobby. And I invite you to follow us and to pay attention to those. I just want to bring to your attention that today at 5 o'clock on the Plux outside the Parliament, a very important thing will happen. Women are going to speak. The Let Women Speak group are going to be there, and they're going to be testifying and telling the truth about trans ideology and how it hurts women and girls. And you're all invited to come along and hear what women have to say. I want to thank especially our panelists. It's been wonderful hearing from Dr. Ashley Frawley. I really appreciate Kellie-Jay Keen coming over. She has a very busy agenda, so she really fit us in, and I'm very, very grateful you did. And of course, we wouldn't be here without our host, András, László. And thank you very much. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Switch off my live stream.
Time goes quickly.
I know, we're waiting for that. I thought we had until 3.
Good afternoon. Hello. Still 2 minutes of your time.
Especially
So my name is
you
Sarah.
began your presentation